Hello now. While we're waiting, we're going to sing Kumbaya. I got jokes I could do. This is Morgan Freeman. I'm going to narrate tonight one of the most complicated non-penguin stories that I've ever done. Anyway, while we're waiting for Shaquille O'Neal to get teed up, I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties or it may not be played. But let's, all right, it's teeing up right now. Let's check it out.
Shaquille O'Neal. Too many foster children have been unheard, unrepresented, uncared for. It's time to make our nation's foster kids a priority. Donate, volunteer, speak up, foster, adopt. Their lives hang in the balance. Join the fight for foster kids at fosterboy.com.
All right, greetings everyone. My name is Lindsay Collins Wilson, CEO of First Star. We often hear the phrase, does art imitate life or does life imitate art? In Foster Boy, art imitated life. Jamal represents a unique population in the US that is rarely heard and never seen because of their identity of foster. It's often shrouded in shame and embarrassment, thus quieting young people's urges to reveal they are foster youth. Jamal represents our teenagers in care, put in the system for a variety of reasons, none of which their fault, but the result of challenges with their family unit. My organization, First Star, works specifically with these young people. And instead of assuming the worst, we assume the best. We provide the unconditional love and support, the educational framework that is grounded in academic attainment, the life skills, lessons that many of us learned from our parents and our family members. And lastly, we remain a constant, steadfast support in their lives when most people have simply let them go. I understand the infinite value and possibilities every young person brings into this world, and it is my passion, as well as my organization's mission, to uplift this reality for foster youth throughout the nation. Today, I am overjoyed to present Boston Taylor, a young man I met over 4 years ago as a freshman in high school in the First Star UCLA Academy. He is a testament to the impact thoughtful, loving, strategic, and consistent adults can have on a young person's life trajectory. Boston represents the 98% of scholars First Star graduates from high school on an annual basis, and the 89% we send to college. Thank you, Boston, for demonstrably exemplifying our work at First Star here on this panel. Boston is a first-year student studying philosophy at UCLA. Thank you for joining me. The floor is now yours.
Oh, so, like I'm kind of nervous. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to say. I suppose like I really enjoyed the film, and um, I just really want to thank First Star for the opportunity to like place me in a college environment. I wasn't really used to that. Like, uh, I've never been to UCLA until I was with First Star, so that was a major opportunity. And yeah, that yeah, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be saying from here. I'm a bit nervous. Sorry.
That's all right. You're doing a fine job, young man. Your life story speaks for itself. We're just honored and appreciative of the fact that through the obstacles and the impediments and the barriers that you've been able to come forward and to, as we talk more on the panel, we'll engage and we'll be able to learn more. Obviously, you're an extraordinary young man. Anybody studying philosophy at UCLA is a remarkable young man. So we celebrate that. We might ask you to drop some Plato, some Aristotle on us tonight, or maybe Bertrand Russell or some analytical philosophy, whatever you study and whatever's down with you, that's a beautiful thing. So let me take the opportunity then to introduce this remarkable and very, very powerful panel. Let's start with the man who wrote and conceived, produced this remarkable film, Mr. J. Paul Deritani, who is a Chicago-based attorney. I'm from Detroit, but I gotta say Chicago is one of my favorite cities. If a Detroiter comes on the scene, if a Detroiter comes on the scene, I got to represent the D. But in the meantime, I'm gonna give some love. I'm gonna give some love to Chicago because I dig that city. He was introduced to the broken system of foster care when he started taking on cases about foster youth. And Jay has has since then spent years fighting for justice for children and their loved ones, even winning a $45 million settlement in a lawsuit against an organization that released a child back into his abusive mother's custody. And then that child was subsequently murdered. He wrote and directed Foster Boy to share details about the nature of the corrupt foster care system and the impacts it has had on countless young lives, and to inspire audiences to help fix foster care. And that's more than a hashtag with him. That's a serious and enduring commitment that grows out of his experience. So we'll give a virtual round of applause to attorney J. Paul Deritani. Next up is Shane Paul McGee. He is an inspiring and exceptional young actor. You've seen him in TV roles on Criminal Minds, Shameless, and Sacred Lies, as well as film roles in the film After and What Men Want. After taking on his role as Jamal in Foster Boy, Brother Shane was horrified to learn about the reality of the foster care system and the abuse that foster youth he spoke to described to him, and he continues to raise awareness for foster care reform. Let's give him also a virtual round of applause. Mr. Evan Handler is up next. I'm sure you remember him in his culture-defining, iconic role as one of the few men to get some serious play in space every, was it Sunday night on the groundbreaking series and films, Sex and the City. I couldn't make it, he filled in for me, and the rest is history. He's an extraordinary young man. And you remember him there as Harry Goldenblatt on that series, and as Charlie Runkle on Showtime's more recent Californication. He starred extensively in other films and TV shows, including The People versus O.J. Simpson, an American crime story, a riveting deconstruction and demythologization of an American icon. Too Big to Fail, about those banks, of course, Ransom, and Natural Born Killers. These are all remarkably visible roles in very powerful films. He's also a writer who shared his story of overcoming a serious leukemia diagnosis and his transformed life afterward in his books, Time on Fire, My Comedy of Terrors, and It's Only Temporary, The Good News and Bad News of Being Alive. Let's give it up for Mr. Evan Handler. We hear the large applause out there for certain. You've heard from her, a distinguished, insightful, bright, and beautiful woman, Lindsay Collins. She is the CEO of First Star, the nation's only foster youth college prep program that utilizes residential spaces on university campuses to house students over the course of their high school years. You've already heard from Mr. Taylor. Her work at First Star has provided transformational access to opportunities and safety for foster youth. And as you'll see, as we talk in this panel, safety is an extremely important concept that has to be appealed to when it comes to these youth. And she's been a relentless voice in demanding healing and supporting young people traumatized, and I do mean traumatized, by the child welfare system. First Star youth were actively involved in the production process for Foster Boy, and Ms. Collins's perspective on the issues that foster youth face is clearly invaluable. Let's give a hearty round of applause virtually for Ms. Collins. I think she said Wilson as well. And then finally, we've heard from the young philosopher, petit philosophe, Brother Boston Taylor. He is indeed an exceptional young man. He joined the First Star UCLA Academy as a rising ninth grader with an abundance of enthusiasm and curiosity. And despite experiencing family adversity and the crucially devastating, in some instances, child welfare system, he graduated from high school and has gone on, as we've already heard, to study at UCLA, where he is a first-year student in philosophy. So this is our panel of extraordinary folk, and each of them could take easily an hour to talk about the issues that are critical. So I want to begin with Attorney J. Paul Deratani. And sir, you wrote and envisioned this extraordinary film. You wrote it and directed it. And so we've heard just a bit of your background as to why you might take this issue up. But tell us why now, especially with the crucial discourse in this society about the care of children, about the nature of their care, especially in large systems. I mentioned earlier what happens with children at the border, but what happens to children in a system that has been rendered invisible? The horrors of that case have at least become politically visible, but so often the foster care system itself, its traumas, its corruptions, its abuses are often masked. So tell us a bit about what compelled you to write and direct this film.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, Dr. Dyson, I have to tell you that I'm originally from Detroit as well. So we are Detroit, my brother. So I just have to clarify that. Amen.
Amen. Tigers, represent the deed. Right, no doubt.
So I actually wrote, I didn't direct, but I wrote and produced Foster Boy. Great director, Yusuf Dalera. I've had two passions in my life. One is law and justice, and I started out as a legal aid lawyer and couldn't basically eat. I was tired of macaroni and cheese as a legal aid lawyer, so started my own practice and, did all sorts of litigation, environmental litigation, fighting, and different things like that, always on behalf of the injured party. Then one day in walks this case with a young mother who took in a young man, 16 years old, but she had 3 kids in her home. And that young man had such a severe psychological history. He had raped his own half-sister, cousin, so forth. And the agency, a private agency, Dr. Dyson, a private corporation, had a contract with the state of Illinois to place this young man.
Wow.
And they
Wow.
placed him in there, and he severely abused the other kids.
Hmm.
At first, I got to admit, I didn't even know, what kind of case do you file? Is it negligence? Is it this? Is it federal? Is it state? Did some research, found out, learned some things myself, such as there were privatized, and I think it's still in 20-some states, privatization of foster care in half the states in the United States. The only way you can have a foster child in Kansas and Florida.
Mm-hmm.
I was shocked. I'm about capitalism. I think they make a good BMW, a good car, good pen, all that sort of stuff. Kids aren't products. Children should not be products. And the bottom line shouldn't be a profit by a corporation. It has to be the best interest of the child. So I took on this case. We fought it. They fought me every step of the way. They even went after my law license. There's a scene in the film where Matthew Modine's character is running, and he's going out for a jog to try to relieve himself and just let loose some of the pressure, and he gets run off the road. I could tell you I was on a bicycle, and I can't prove it. I don't know, but I felt like somebody came awfully close, and I was getting some threats by this company. Long story short, we wound up settling that case, resolving it. They wanted a non-disclosure, which I hate, but sometimes you have to do it for your client.
Right.
But I went on to write some articles and took on another case, and it just, one thing became another, and I've been doing these cases now for the last 15 years. And then it melded into my other love, which is I've been writing, and I've written some plays and screenplays and so forth. And I happened to come across the wonderful Peter Samuelson, who works with Lindsay at First Star, and he got my script, and he said, "Listen, I think you need to make this into a film." I said, "Let's go." And he started raising some money. I started raising a little bit of money. And the next thing we know, we got the amazing Shaquille O'Neal, whose heart's as big as his hands and feet, to help us out with this and carry us over the bridge, so to speak.
Right. No, remarkable. Well, let's turn to Miss Collins Wilson. So, your perspective is on the ground. You've been doing this. This is not new to you. You've carved out a space where you're trying to facilitate the transformation of a system that has often been hostile or indifferent to the lives of many of the young people in those systems, especially as in this case of young African-American folk, but we know it reaches across the board. And the conscientization of our attorney friend here, Mr. Daratani, where he saw what was going on and then was compelled to write about it. Tell us from your perspective how you view that system. And I know you can't overhaul it in one conversation, but maybe speak to the need for the transformational aspects of leveraging critical public consciousness so we can make sure that these young people are taken care of.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I think for the layperson, many of us on this call and watching the panel are familiar with the child welfare system, but some of you are not. Before I moved into this position at First Star, I didn't realize the challenges that young people who did not have a mother and or a father to call their own, what they went through. I think as a layperson outside of this space, we assume that they're being taken care of. We assume that because they have a home, they may have a bed to lay in, that they are okay. Well, once I moved into this space, I realized that that is not true. Our young people in the system are suffering at the hands of many folks. And we talk about some young people, of course, having wonderful caregivers, and there are wonderful caregivers participating on this panel as viewers, and thank you for all that you do. But there are some folks that are not wonderful caregivers, and it even goes beyond that. The system itself is meant to ensure that young people feel like they are safe and their basic needs are met. When we think about our families, we think about our children, we think about the folks around us that have been successful and have moved from one stage to the next. It was more than just having a place to lay your head, and it was more than just having some food on the table. Our child welfare system, that's where we get it wrong. You have young people in the system for years on end, and the basic that they receive, the basics, are simply that: a bed and food, right? And then having this adult caregiver that is somewhere around within their picture. When I think about overhauling the system, I really think about how people consider the nuclear family. I think about how people consider community. I
Right.
think about the value we place on low SES, and that is low socioeconomic status. So folks that are coming from spaces of poverty, how do we treat them when they are unable to access certain resources? What happens? Sometimes those children are removed from the home because of poverty. If someone is working at McDonald's and they are a manager at McDonald's and they have 3 children and they're doing their best to take care of their kids, those children, by the way, have more than just a bed to sleep on and some food to eat. They have love, and they have care, and they have consistency from a parent.
Amen.
But what happens if that parent gets sick? What happens if they no longer can work their job at McDonald's and now they don't have the money to bring into the home to take care of their children? Not because they don't love them, not because they don't care about them, but because of medical issues. Those children are removed from their home and put into the child welfare system. What I would like us to do is to really think deeply about how the child welfare system responds to families in need, to young people in need, because we have got to get this right. And I see COVID, we haven't really talked about COVID-19, but I absolutely see this time in the middle of a pandemic to sort of go back to the drawing board for a lot of things. Education, for sure. My background as a middle school principal, as an educator, that is my career, that is my life's call. We have to think about education, but we absolutely have to also think about the child welfare system. This is an opportunity to go back to the drawing board, to think about what were the impetus, the reasons why we started the child welfare system, and understanding that we need to do some backwards planning. What our young people are receiving in the system, it is not what they deserve. They deserve so much more. The work we do at First Star, we do our best to supplement, to support, to assist, to give them everything that they just aren't getting while they are experiencing the system for a short period of time. Or for our teenagers in care, they tend to experience the child welfare system until they exit the system at the age of 18 or at the age of 21.
Right.
So going back to the drawing board.
Very good. No, it's extremely important.
Absolutely.
And speaking of going to the drawing board, one of the ways we draw, imagine, conjure images of what's going on there is to put it on, the small or the big screen. And so I want to turn to Shane Paul McGee, who does a remarkable job in this film, and speak to you a bit about what was compelling to you about this role and how did it affect you personally. We mentioned in your introduction in the bio that it caused you to think more seriously about this issue, to be more informed. So tell us about what you learned when you played this powerful role and, how it has changed you since then.
Yeah, well, the thing is you can't unknow what you know. And I think that playing this role opened my eyes to just a lot of the injustices occurring in the foster care system. I mean, I didn't know that it was privatized. I didn't know the ins and outs of it. But, how does it affect the psyche of a child when they are traveling from place to place with their belongings in a trash bag? When they come home and they're told to pack up because they're going to a new home, and a system that is built so that companies profit every time that they are removed from that home and then placed in a new home. It's not right. And like Jay said, leave the kids out of it, make money elsewhere. But I had the remarkable opportunity of meeting extraordinary foster youth through the First Star Academy, and hearing their stories. I mean, the things that they had to go through that no one should have to go through, and just being able to pull from that to play Jamal. But it's been truly a real honor to use my art, my craft to bring awareness and to hopefully inspire some sort of change, and hopefully legislative change.
Hmm. Good. Well, you can't ask much more of art than that, to have a real world impact on the society about an issue that you've become educated about, and also want to help educate the broader community. Mr.
Yes, sir.
Handler, and thank you, sir. Mr. Handler, you've been involved with, we've already mentioned the iconic roles dealing with sex and personal relationships, dealing with criminality, murder as well in a different way. Uh, Cancer in terms of a traumatic, existential and personal, as well as health crisis. So when you add another layer of the, child welfare system and what happens in foster care and some of the instances that we see of abuse in Foster Boy, tell us about the role art plays in the transformation of human consciousness and people trying to grapple with stuff they'd rather ignore, but that they have to come to grips with. And when we present it in art, it forces us to grapple with it in a very serious way, different than when we hear some report or some dry recount of how horrible the system is.
Right. Well, thank you for leading to that question, because I didn't know how you were going to fit me in until you got to that, the tag there. I'm not an expert in foster care. I wasn't when I was hired to do this movie.
Right.
I think, but I have some expertise in filmmaking and storytelling, so I know a good story. I think Jay and the others thought my naturally belligerent nature might serve them. But look, I was brought up. I'm proud and happy and relieved, especially through these last several years, that I was brought up in a socially awake and aware family. My parents participated in the civil rights movement in the 1960s and the women's movement in the 1970s, and I grew up in an atmosphere that was later echoed in the play Master Harold and the Boys that I did with Athol Fugard, which is that if someone is suffering under a system, you're suffering as well, even if it's not you directly suffering. That oppressors also suffer from the oppression they impose. So I have always tried to involve myself in projects, if I can, that speak to these issues. I know that when my dad used to take me when I was around 11 or 12 to see the Sidney Lumet movies from the early 70s, Dog Day Afternoon and Serpico, I developed a fascination that I wasn't able to express in words until much later, of thinking, I enjoy telling stories that make people look at difficult truths that they'd rather ignore, packaged in a fashion that's too entertaining to look away from. And so even in the very commercial projects that I've done, the ones that have given me the greatest sense of joy and accomplishment, and like I'm actually contributing something to society and not just to my ego, are the ones that do that successfully, even if it's small and subversive element of the project, which this one is much more overt. But that is certainly the stuff that led me to write down my story when I came out. Like Shane said, you can't not know what you know. I think there's also a sense that's very important in society, again illustrated by these last several years, that if you see something wrong, it's your obligation to state what's wrong, and to state that this isn't right, and not just to shrug your shoulders and say, well, that's just the way it goes. It's outside my immediate view, and so I don't have to worry about it. So those are the principles that I was brought up on. Those are the principles that I think society requires to function well. And I was proud and happy to be able to contribute what I could to this.
Right. No, excellent. Brother Taylor, let's pick up on or where Mr. Hanlon left off there in terms of being reared in an environment, a family, a climate of wokeness. They were woke before woke got awake. I like that, both in the 60s in terms of civil rights and in terms of the 70s with the burgeoning feminist movement. You're a philosopher, right? So speak to us as you study philosophy, right, about notions. What is philosophy about? It's about truth. It's about the nature of reality. It's about the nature of other minds. How can we exist in our own mind and think about somebody else existing in their minds? And how can we use language to communicate, right? So you're a philosopher, you're a deep thinker. So tell us in your own, how do you square up being able to go to a place like UCLA with the help of Miss Collins Wilson, going to UCLA, one of the hotbeds of philosophical thought in the 20th century, some of the most famous philosophers dealing with serious issues have taught there or have been trained there. So how do you square, thinking big thoughts about big ideas, truth, justice, reality, and what you look at in terms of your own experience with the child welfare system and how there's a gulf between the ideas that you study in class and what you see going on there, or how you can use philosophy to talk about truth, about justice, about what's fair, about what's righteous in the world. Can you talk to us a bit about that?
I believe so. Currently, this is my first quarter here, so it's like I'm just starting out. But
Right.
I've been interested in philosophy since February, really. And right now, my current class is Intro to Ethical Theory. So we're going over Plato's virtue ethics and Kant's categorical imperative. And Kant is a very interesting figure, and he talks about duty and doing things from duty that's morally good. And so I tend to agree, but I also believe that in order to maximize people acting from duty, the environment should also be suitable for them to act from duty. So when it comes to we look at the African American community recently, there's been a protest and often people riot realistically, but Martin Luther King said, riots aren't necessary. People don't go around rioting just to riot. Riots are symptoms of greater systematic issues that exist. And so recently, I got really politically engaged, but not necessarily activism wise, but on the theoretical side. So reading books by The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander, or Paulo Freire, where Evan Handler talks about the oppressor is oppressed by their own oppression, or even reading Marx and Engels and Lenin talking about conditions and capital and different things. I definitely see it in my own life. I'll admit I didn't know a lot of things about my family until I talked to my mother and my aunt, and they just talk about how just my uncles and it's really hard to talk about, but it's my uncles and my aunts and my own mother were caught up in the drug epidemic, and so that hit us pretty hard. Set us back. A lot of my uncle's in prison for the rest of his life, so it's stuff like that. It's us all interconnected, and so when we talk about things like personal responsibility, while it is true that it's on the individual, it's also equally true it's on the society to act and maximize people's environments, because it's it's almost putting the onus of responsibility solely on this one person, and to basically say, well, you should just be morally good. It's almost saying I'm gonna put barriers in front of you, and it's up to you to get around them. But if you don't do it right, then you're in trouble for it. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And I think that's just unequivocally unfair.
Right.
And
right.
that's sort of why I became a philosophy major, is to really try to understand the world and seek answers for why my life is the way it is, or why other people's life is the way that it is. So,
Wow. This man, he done gave us a philosophy class, you know, reduced it to like one presentation there. Y'all getting your money's worth out there tonight. That's about $50,000 worth right there. This man is talking about Immanuel Kant with his deontological emphasis, right? Kant talking about making a virtue out of necessity. Plato's talking about virtue ethics, as you said. No, it's about your character. It's about who you become as a person, the habits and dispositions, the skills, the moral vision. So you're giving us, you know, a relationship between that epistemology, big word to talk about knowledge, ontology, talking about being, you know, by the time you come on 4 years, you'll be dropping more science than Einstein, brother. But that's a great place to talk about. And I want to kick it back to brother J. Paul D'Aretani, that, you know, when you look at the philosophical, here's a young man, extraordinary by any measure, out of a system that has not been designed to see him grow and flourish in the way he has. How many more Brother Taylors are out there who could flourish and maximize? And I'm sure your concern, you know, Brother D'Aretani, attorney, was to really make certain that the barriers and impediments and obstacles wouldn't prevent the flourishing of more young people like this. And therefore, an act of art becomes the expression of a philosophy too, a philosophy of commitment to the betterment of these young people. Tell us about how that played a role and how you've highlighted such an important thing in this film.
Well, first of all, I can't say it better than Boston and what he just talked about. And when you look at what's going on in America, it really is all about barriers, isn't it? And we also can't ignore the elephant in the room, which has been racism, the elephant in the American experience that's been in this room for 300-400 years, and it's gone on too long. And you know, I was saddened. I'm sorry, I'm going to speak a little political. I was saddened. I was part of the Obama uprising, and I was so proud. And you know, being in my white bubble, in some ways, my white liberal bubble in Lincoln Park, I'm thinking to myself, racism and all of this, it's all on the downside and it's done. And then we elect Donald Trump and all of that. Right. And we see such ugliness that came out, you know, in Charlottesville and so forth. And we talk, you know, you're my generation. I learned the word woke for the first time. And I learned what white silence equals violence. And I never thought of myself as silent, but I also I didn't think of myself as speaking up enough. And we gotta speak up, everybody, because I was raised in Detroit and we weren't so well off and so forth. And I saw some pretty rough stuff, especially with busing and stuff like that in the 60s.
Right.
I'm still privileged. I still had a lot more opportunity, and the barriers that Boston had, and yet here he is talking about Kant and talking about the philosophers that I forgot about 30 years ago. Mm-hmm. You know? And with Foster Boy, one of the things about this film that I think was important was it also does speak, and I think Shane does such a brilliant job in taking what's in what are the words and bringing it out, because it did talk about the racial injustice of the legal system and how this white privileged lawyer who's a corporate guy, not me, but he's a corporate guy, and he's you know, he just doesn't associate, he doesn't think about African American, he doesn't think about poverty. He's representing the corporate guy, and they have to fight their own battles to cure it. And in the end, it's the reverse sort of I want to say it's Shane's character basically saves this broken white guy who has lost his family. He didn't have a relationship with his son, and man, Shane's acting brings it out, brings it home. And there's a scene that Shane says in the car where he says, he's talking to Matthew's character, the lawyer, and he says, Matthew's upset because he doesn't have a relationship with his son, and he goes, "You ain't done being a father. Your son's 11." You know, that type of delivery. And by the way, the delivery of Evan Handler as opposing counsel was, I would not want to be against him. So
no, he's got skills up there,
you
bro.
know, so we got to speak about all that, and I think we are finally, and I think I hope I'm more optimistic about this country now than I have been in a long time. I think we're going to address some things. I hope so.
No, and thank you for you're not interjecting politics. You're acknowledging that it exists and that it shapes what we're talking about here. Because let's not pretend that an environment that has been hostile to so many peoples, with Black people, Latinx people, gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, queer, and other, and folk from around the world, immigrants and the like, it's been tough times for the last 4 years. So a film like this comes right at the right moment to try to provoke even further analysis of systemic issues. We've been talking about systemic oppression. This is one of the hidden arenas within which systemic oppression operates, because any word that ends with system, you got to deal with the perpetuation of a legacy of inequality. Healthcare system, criminal justice system, public education system, foster care system. So thank you for bringing that out. There are many people who are asking questions. I'm jealous of them because they get a chance to displace me right now, and I ain't mad. But before we do that, let me very quickly turn to Ms. Collins Wilson and ask, given what Brother Daratani just talked about in regard to the kind of systemic barriers and problems that are confronted and trying to loosen some of those barriers, especially the racial injustice and the racial intolerance that prevails. As a Black woman in America, give us your perspective about how these often racialized elements of inequality, of a kind of subversion of the stability of these communities has some racial consequence, even if there's no conscious racial intent, though we can argue that, that has to be acknowledged.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think what BLM has done for a lot of us, not only for white Americans and others, but I think for Black Americans, it's given us an opportunity to feel more comfortable in our spaces where we are, amongst others, to talk about the racial injustices, right? We're on our social media, we're watching TV, we're reading articles, and now everybody's getting the same article. It's not only the article coming through here in Los Angeles, the Sentinel, right, which is a Black newspaper, or LA Focus, a Black newspaper. What's important about that is, in order for us to do something about it, we have to know about it. And so, like Shane mentioned, you can't undo something you know, but some of us don't even know. Some of us don't know what is happening. One of the things that we've done at our organization, and not only have I seen it at First Star, but I've seen it in other spaces, is instead of just simply saying X% of people are in the foster care system, we're starting to dig deeper into those numbers. It's not just X% of people in the foster care system, it is 30% of the foster care system is African American, about 32% or maybe around there is Latinx, and then the rest of the foster care system is white. But when you look deeper into those numbers, African Americans only represent about 12% of this nation. Why are we disproportionately represented in the foster care system? So Latinx, they're pretty much proportioned with the number of Latinx individuals in the country. Same with white Americans, but Blacks in particular, we're double the number in the foster care system. Now, when you break that number down, you start to see that educational attainment, you start to see suspension, you start to see this pipeline to criminal justice. You see those numbers again higher within our community. So what's important about this new sort of heightened space of talking about the differences that we have, but also this legacy. I love what you said, this legacy of inequality that we have to come to terms with. Thank you for mentioning that. Indigenous youth as well. They are disproportionately represented in the foster care system. This is an opportunity for us as leaders to take the time to look at the numbers and again, go back to the drawing board and determine what we want to do to correct, to fix. And instead of being, at some point, we will no longer be reactive and we will be proactive, right? And I think that's the long-term goal. So that's what I think about when I think about the racial conversations that are happening right now, discussing social justice movements or systemic injustices, is that it's on us to start to look at the numbers, to start to look at the data and be comfortable with saying, here's what we are going to do to move the needle in this particular area. And so, you know, I mentioned it a few moments ago, we've done that at First Star. We're starting to look closely at our numbers to identify who are our students, how are they being supported, what are their, what are the challenges that they face, and how can we be laser-like in our approach in improving that young person's life, as opposed to saying, well, 80% are good, but what about the 20%? And that 20%, unfortunately, when we're thinking about race in America, are generally our African-American students.
Yeah, no, excellently stated. Let's get to some of the questions in from our Facebook audience. Christine from Facebook asked, Boston, what supports do you see as needed for those who are just about to age out or just aged out from your perspective?
That's a really interesting question. At least from my perspective, I would say like financial support, like in terms of like getting people set up with apartments or like funds. I believe this is the question, right? Like, what do people like need in terms of aid when, yeah. So like, I'd say like, just like funds or just assistance, like financial assistance, because like it's hard, like getting a job, especially like now. And also like considering the like cost of living is also rising. Like it's not easy, like getting a high paying job. Like McDonald's doesn't pay enough to secure housing, and like healthcare is also something that's still important. So yeah, like definitely material financial resources are like, or funds are just needed in general to help
Right.
young people.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. My wife and I were with the billionaire Robert Smith last year, and he consciously and intentionally tries to address those young people who are aging out. And after being aged out, because then you're persona non grata at that point, right? To use the Latin phrase that you're probably philosophically familiar with. So you ain't nobody, and you're in a tough position there. You're no longer young enough to have, oh, bless their heart, aren't they the young people? Then when you get older, it's like, yo, on to the next one. So that there's not the kind of considered engagement with the issues once you age out of that system and you're left to your own resources. Where do you go for Thanksgiving? Where do you go for Christmas? Where do you go for holidays? Who are the people you talk to when you're at school, right? Who do you get a chance to engage with? It's an extremely difficult liminal situation, as Victor Turner, when you study some more philosophy and as it intersects with anthropology, that's a name you come up with right there. So that liminal position where you're stuck in between. So it's an extremely important point, and thank you for your response to that. For Shane, Bridget from Facebook asks, how do you prepare for a role like that?
Well, you know, it just touches back to, again, I met the scholars at First Star at the UCLA branch, and there was a day that they shared a lot of the stories with me, and through their letters of what had happened and what they wanted people to know about the foster care system. And you know, I was able to keep some of those letters. Obviously, it was anonymous, but using that to help kind of build the background, because this was not a system that I was familiar with, and this was, you know, not a story that was like my own. And I had to kind of build that world for Jamal, and try my best to do it justice. And again, this is a responsibility that you have as an artist, as a storyteller, is that if you are not familiar with what your subject matter is, you need to become familiar in order to try to approach the material. So so for me, it was a you know, that really helped me out a great deal. And then it was, you know, Jamal is a writer, so I was writing a lot during that time in a journal. But it was very demanding, and I was so grateful for that challenge, especially coming out of a 4-year college and studying acting, to just jump in like that. It was great. It was great,
Right.
and to use my voice in that way, it was really awesome.
Mm-hmm. Very good, very good. For Mr. Handler, you have been a great actor. You've also been a writer. Which one do you enjoy most? and how can you use both of those skills and talents to tell such a compelling story?
Well, I mean, I'm more of an actor than I am most of my life. Um, uh, but when I did start to write, it was because I had experienced a certain degree of injustice that I felt was not widely visible myself. So I felt I wanted to expose it, you know, and I didn't understand why, especially when people told their medical stories, nobody was brand name specific. There was always this reaction of, oh, but you'll get sued. And I thought, well, no, I really don't think that's the way it works. I don't think institutions want to cultivate bad publicity. And if you're speaking factually, you know, and I thought it was important to set an example in that way. So when I did write and when I did publish my books, there was a great deal of pleasure in being able to be, you know, I did work with editors, but it's much less edited than lending yourself to a film or a television show, which is really, you know, giving yourself over to interpret someone else's writing and story. And there was a lot of joy to that, and especially because it was, I thought, an important issue. And I think then I just harken back to what I said before about you know, when I work as an actor, you don't even get your, you know, pick of all the roles. It's not like you know, you get to choose from amongst what is offered your way. And so if you can find projects like this that have something important to say, that have a way to address some of the inequalities in the world, or simply shed light on some of the things that need some sunlight to be exposed, that's extremely gratifying. So those are the things that keep me pulling along.
Right. Very good. Very good. No, very, very good. Ms. Collins Wilson, let me combine a couple of these. Someone asks of you, is it a civil rights struggle, the one that never began? And then are there opportunities for mentoring and speaking to your students?
I'll answer the second one because that one's the easiest. Yes, absolutely. Go to firststar.org. And there's an opportunity there to fill out a form to work with us to speak to our students. In terms of civil rights struggle, absolutely. When we think about why people have marched in the past, there's a few factors that we can sort of attach to those groups. They were generally over 18, or they were young people, but they were teetering on this young adult phase of their life. They were experiencing something that they maybe had some resources to help and to push and to do something about. With foster youth, they don't have the ability to do that. So I mentioned in my opening that they are rarely seen, never heard, and that's because young people in the system don't generally attach foster youth to their name when they are meeting new people because of the shame that's attached to it. But the other reason why is because they can't do much about it. When you are in the system and you are struggling in the child welfare system, the opportunities to sort of say, I need someone to come in and fix this are really limited. And I think Jay can actually speak to this. And so why this is a civil rights matter is because so many thousands of foster youth, thousands of youth don't have the opportunity to stand up and say, I do deserve equal representation and equal supports, equal protection. And because that isn't happening, this is a civil rights struggle that we never got to.
Right, right. No, powerful. Speaking of Brother Jay, look, there are a couple questions here. I guess this is directed to anybody on the panel. Then I want to ask specifically something for Brother Deratani. So the general one is, do any of the actors or others want to become foster parents after participating in this film? That's a great question. And then for you, Brother Deratani, what is the future of the series based on the film? So did any of you want to become involved as foster parents after, you know, participating in this film? And then what's the future of the series there?
Well, I'll tell you, me and my husband right now are in the process of soon to become foster parents. So,
oh, congratulations!
Excited, wonderful young man, and it's a whole new world for me, and I hope I know what I'm doing.
Mhm.
Maybe you can teach me, one of you folks that are parents. As far as the series, yeah, we have been talking. I had a great conversation when I was summoned to Atlanta to talk to Shaquille O'Neal. Dr. Shaquille said to me, one of the first questions he said is, tell me something, why do you think it's small? And I said, I'm sorry, what do you mean? He goes, why are we just doing this film? Why aren't we reaching out and doing a series? And I said, you're Shaq, I'm Jay. You got all the powers, so you tell me. If we can, you want to do a series, we'll do it. And he said, we're going to do it. So we're in the process. I'm working with two amazing, beautiful, incredibly talented African-American writers, as it happens, Trey Ellis and Jamal Joseph, and we're working on a series. I think you know them, Dr. Dyson.
Right. Yes, sir.
And they're terrific, and we're pitching this. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to say to who yet, but
Right.
I think you can look forward to seeing it in the future, and hopefully we have Shane involved and Lugasa Jr., Evan, all these wonderful people.
Let me see. Somebody says, is there a role for Dyson in there? We think he's an extraordinary actor. I just think I made that up. Oh my oh my goodness. So when we think about where we are as a nation, when we think about the fact that we're now at a critical stage, right? We've shifted from one way of doing things, supposedly, hopefully, to another. Do you think this is the right moment, a propitious moment for us to also shift consciousness around? According to Shaq's point about, like, let's go big. Why are we only doing this? Let's do a series too, okay? So if I'm auditioning here, I did Morgan Freeman. I'm doing Shaq. What I got to do? What a brother got to do? I'm just saying, okay? So, but the thing is that we're at a propitious moment where we can shift awareness and consciousness with, Biden and Harris coming in, let's just say it that way. And hopefully there will be new awareness and attention paid to a system that has hurt so many young people and has not been as just and as fair as it needs to be. Do you all think that this is the right moment and the right moment for changing minds about this issue?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Uproot it all. Uproot it all, please.
Yeah. And I think, we talk about the pendulum, and I guess Barack Obama must have brought a big pendulum in, and it scared some folks. And then we got this pendulum shift back the other way that was, I mean, I think about devastated this country. And now we got another pendulum swing, and beautiful, amazing pendulum swing, which is progressive and enlightened and long overdue. For God's sakes, how long did it take to get an African-American woman to be on the ticket? I mean, it's ridiculous, but it's happened. So instead of being sad about the past, I guess we can celebrate what's now and hopefully look towards Biden and Senator or Vice President Harris and say that we can usher in a new change. And maybe those folks who are still so scared can start relaxing and realizing that we're all one people. We are all on this earth together, and it is time we work together. Foster children, a child is a child is a child, and we got to take care of our kids. If we don't take care of our kids, then we have not evolved as a society. Nelson Mandela said that much better than I just said it, but that's at the first and forefront of what we have to do.
And
I'm gonna interject. Oh, sorry. You wanted to say something, Lindsay?
You can go first, Evan. I'll follow.
Well, I'm gonna be, a little cautionary. As I see the last several years, the pendulum swings, but the pendulum swings kind of from the middle or just left of middle to way, way, way over on the right. The image of Barack Obama may be radical to people, but he was not a radical leader. The image of Kamala Harris may be radical to people, but she's not a radical leader. The right is truly behaving in radical fashion, while the left behaves very centrist and absorbs all this criticism for being communist, which is the same ridiculous label that was hurled at me, in 1972, when, I would say my parents weren't going to vote for Richard Nixon. It's this, ridiculous 1950s non-slur slur that seems to keep the left from really pursuing radical agendas. So I hope, we didn't elect the most progressive candidates, but I hope that the administration that comes in will seize the opportunity and insist upon enacting more I don't want to say radicalist or extreme, but more progressive. Yes, thank you. More progressive agenda, because combating extremism with periods of eccentricism is not a good recipe for a long-term society.
Right. No, it's a great point to remember.
I would also say, if not now, when? One of the things that this pandemic has illuminated for American students is this idea of learning loss. Students, because we've had to shift to distance learning, are now falling behind in school. Well, we've often heard the comment, if one group gets a cough, the other group gets the flu. Foster youth in this pandemic are getting the flu. Not only are they not learning through distance learning because of lack of technology, devices, connectivity, they are suffering also in job employment. So when the pandemic started, folks started to lose jobs. I've read several articles now that have said that our workforce will be shrinking, and not shrinking in terms of the tech sector, shrinking in terms of those jobs that are blue collar. Again, when one group gets a cough, the other group gets the flu, and foster youth are getting the flu. So we have to do something now, or else we are leaving even more young people behind. We talk about the achievement gap in education. We talk about the invisible gap in the foster care system that has to do with attainment, as well as other very key life metrics. Our youth, if we talk about 50% of our youth, just 50% graduating from high school, when we get through this pandemic, that number is going to continue to go down. And it can't go down, because this world is getting better. Our communities should be getting better. Our politics should be getting better. So our young people should be improving. So we have to do the work now. We have to be forceful. We have to be strategic. We have to be conscious. We have to have these conversations, because our foster youth deserve it. If we don't, they're going to struggle even more so than they did coming into COVID-19.
Right. Well, before we wrap it up, that's an excellent statement. Let me just turn finally to Brother Taylor, and say, what did you hope for? What did you wish at your, most vulnerable moment, where you wanted somebody, something to intervene? What is it that you hoped for? Not that you speak for all people who are, implicated in the system, but you obviously are very articulate, very sharp, very insightful, very reflective young man. What are the one and the two things, or even three if you want, that young people in a similar system just want from the broader world, whether it's understanding, whether it's support, whether it's engagement, whether it's relief? Tell us about that, please.
I can at least say for myself, I'll preface by saying I have the privilege of sort of not necessarily having to go from home to home. My aunt took me in, I reached out to her when I was going through a hard period, and my uncle took me in. My uncle's a professor, and he, helped guide me. They both helped guide me. I will say, being cared for and being loved, that's really important, because at times I do find myself, I've cried, I haven't necessarily had my mom or my dad around, so that made me emotional at certain times. So I've cried, and I just thought about it, and if things could be different, but like material security as well, along with having parents that you can call your own. Like oftentimes I do feel conflicted of like celebrating Mother's Day because I can't celebrate my own mother, but I do acknowledge that people like my aunt herself is a mother. But like it's like it can get like hard and like it's like really acknowledging that like foster kids and foster youth are people. Like they're humans. They interact with the world. They have feelings. They're not like monolithic group. Like I've had so many like opportunities to like just expand and like just imagine. And I can say like with certainty like other my peers in the First Star program haven't had those same opportunities. Like hearing some of their stories about like having to go from home to home, not even not knowing their own parents or one of their parents, like it's hard. And so I will say like making a better world or just even imagining a better world is like something I think foster youth have the capacity for, because I can say like I find myself daydreaming a lot. Like I found out that it's like part of a development that like kids who are sort of alienated from their environment sort of do. Like I find myself just imagining things being better, just like being creative. And so yeah, just material security overall, in my opinion.
Right. No, I mean, that's a desire and a wish, a hope, a dream, an aspiration, an imagination that we should all aspire to and, want for others. And as Brother Handler talked about it in very generous terms, but the capitulation of progressive forces once stuff gets tough, because the right wing has been so dominant that we fail because radical means root. Right? Let's just get to the root of the problem. And in getting to the root of the problem, we got to tell the truth. Some conservative brothers and sisters have been able to more forthrightly tell their truth so they can go into the streets and protest against a president who was duly and justly unelected and obviously will be escorted out of the Oval Office come January 20th, 21, whenever it is he has to leave. And yet it was a due process, and yet their harangues are not seen as the nastiness, the vituperation of an un-American group. And yet those who are progressive, you're un-American, you're not patriotic, you want social justice, you want racial justice, you want justice for queer people and the like, you hate America. So we got to seize control of that narrative so that we begin to articulate our conception of virtue, of justice, of democracy in a way that says, no, we are the Americans who are helping to define what it means to have this nation support everybody. So I want to thank all of the wonderful participants, you, Brother Taylor, for your philosophical acuity, for Ms. Collins Wilson, for your extraordinary, I did get that right? Did I get that right, Wilson? All right. For your extraordinary commitment on the ground every day, the unsexy everyday work of trying to address vulnerable young people. To Brother Shane Paul McGee, you and Brother Taylor, Chocolate Charming, and Hollywood Handsome. We appreciate y'all and your high intelligence as well for being able to help us understand, for literally helping us understand the word change, the name change, James Jamal, how you choose your destiny by choosing what name you're called by and to what you respond. To Brother Handler for being an iconic figure for so many of us in the American cultural production, and to having a variety of roles, but behind that, being a human being of extraordinary introspection and self-criticism, who's able to bring heft and weight to his roles. And finally, to Attorney J. Paul Deratani, for your courage, for your wisdom, for your valor in making sure that a story that was not on the front pages, a story that has not seized the nerve center of American consciousness in this political economy of attention that is ever shrinking. We thank you for putting this on the hopper, so to speak, on the docket to indict American indifference and to be the advocate for them. I'm trying to throw in all these jurisprudential and legal terms, but for you to defend the vulnerable and to defend those who have been seen as indefensible, we thank you for that, my friend. The film is Foster Boy. Y'all need to go out and check it out. Very powerful evocation and a very powerful representation of a system that needs to be paid attention to be overhauled, and the humanity of the people caught up in that system needs to be acknowledged. Thank all of you.
I want to jump in and say that Dr. Dyson gave one hell of an audition. That was a masterful performance of moderation, and it really was it was a privilege to be part of it.
Thank you, my friend. Very kind of you. I've already spent more money than I should have been on your films, and I'm spending more now today. But thank you all so very kindly. Thank all of you, and hopefully we'll get a chance to chat some more in the future. But thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.
Take care.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.